Weather.
Thanks to the AA. Download the new AA app to request a roadside rescue and track the patrol right to your car.
Rain tonight, heaviest over Connacht and the Midlands with a risk of local flooding. Clear spells and scattered showers will slowly spread from the south by morning. Lowest overnight temperatures 12 to 15 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
This is News Talk.
Well, you're welcome along to the show. Football insane over the last couple of days. My goodness, we have a stellar lineup to make sense of it all. Pat Nevin, Filippo Clare, and from Spain, Andy West of the BBC will join us as well. Monday Night Rugby with, wait for it, rugby matches to preview. Aviva Stadium this weekend for Interpros. We have Keith Wood and Rory O'Connor after 8 o'clock. It's the snooker, insanely good as well over the last few days. Ronnie O'Sullivan with title number 6 puts him level with Steve Davis and Ray Reardon. 1 behind Stephen Hendry. Ken Doherty was on OTB AM this morning. 53106 is the text number. At Off the Ball on Twitter is where you'll get us, and we have much to discuss. Get the app as well. OTB Sports is where you can get Ken Doherty and all of OTB AM from this morning. But we'll bring you some Ken around 20 to 9 or so. Richie McCormack, good evening. Hello.
Joseph, you well?
Very well. Very tired after that weekend. My goodness. Ronan, Mullen, hello to you.
Hiya, Joe.
I had a moment on Friday evening, Ronan, when I was watching Eric Donovan. I think lots of us were, when Bayern were in the process of very much dancing on the grave of Barcelona, but not done yet. There was still, some goals to go in. And then Twitter was telling me that if you weren't watching the snooker, frankly, you were in the wrong place. And I thought, how have we so quickly gone to a place where 2 screens isn't even close to being enough? Sport was back in a ginormous way this weekend.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best sporting weekend we've had since March. Definitely, not to mention the sports you just listed off there, but there were a few other things. Obviously, the NBA is into playoff mode as of tonight, I think, and then the UFC had a heavyweight world title fight, so there was little bits for everybody, I think, across this weekend. But Friday was crazy. Fans of narratives, Joe, which I'm sure there are plenty, were had their plate full on Friday, and it's a pity. Eric Donovan it felt like built up a Bayern Barcelona-esque lead in that fight in terms of rounds. He was reeling off the rounds, but unlike boxing is one of these rare sports, it's like Quidditch where the golden snitch is there and the fight can be ended at any moment if there's a knockout punch. And Zelfa Barrett found it, unfortunately, but what a display from Eric Donovan. And I almost feel bad prescribing moral victories to anybody at the top of their field in sports, because that's not what they're after. But it's hard not to credit him, given, talk about jumping in the deep end and to deliver a display like that when not only is the whole country watching, but he's won the hearts and minds of the entire British boxing fraternity and beyond across the last week or so. And he more than delivered, I thought.
He did, and it was very pressurised for him. He had to do well. This was a big chance. He certainly made a big impression out of the ring, but he had to deliver in the ring as well. And as you said, everybody watching had him winning the fight relatively comfortably. Even Eddie Hearn afterwards said he had the first 5 rounds, he had it 4-1 Donovan, and then Barrett's power showed. And you felt that was a threat throughout the fight. You felt that was looming in some way throughout the fight, but Barrett was outclassed in a lot of ways, outboxed, but then the power was evident in the 7th round, and then the 8th, Donovan hung on very bravely, but he was struggling understandably, but emerges, as you say, with a huge amount of credit. So that was Friday, that was nuts. And then there is, Richie, the Pep Manchester City implosion on Saturday. There is Manchester United last night, and then just when you thought, okay, I'm done. I can't take any more sport. Sport can't get any better.
I need my bed, Joe.
It peaks with the Wyndham Championship. That was a bomb going off.
Even for you. Was that one of Phil's bombs?
I asked Pete to get a bomb there.
I think we're not allowed to use bombs in a golf context unless we pay Phil Mickelson a tithe, though. Isn't that the latest thing? He's trademarked it.
So yeah, he's trademarked it.
We need to be careful. That's probably cost us about 20 quid.
What of the 2 Manchesters?
Strange one, isn't it? I mean, the constant, as Ronan mentioned there, the narrative is that Pep can't get out of his own head in terms of playing Champions League ladder stage matches, and that's very much seemed to be the case. Lyon are a decent side. I don't think there's any disputing that, and they proved it very much so the other night. But I don't think they're as good a side that Pep needed to cast aside his last 2.5-3 years of work at Manchester City and suddenly go as a 3-5-2 and a real lack of creativity that ultimately cost them. And the main point we'll look at obviously will be the Raheem Sterling miss and how could he miss from that range, etc. But they lacked the creativity. They lacked a Bernardo Silva. They lacked a David Silva, able to kind of prod and pick holes. And even Phil Foden would have done a job, I think, quite early on against that Leon side and been able to kind of find ways around corners and try and find a way to get City in because they have the players. They have a really good manager. I don't think the other night's defeat negates any of the fine work that they've done. But it raises a question mark as to what they have to do to get to the next level and where Pep has to go in his own mind to get to the next stage, because that's where that game was lost. Was upstairs in his little Catalan cue ball.
Yeah, and it's very strange to say about a player who's had such success as a player and a manager, but it does raise a question mark over his temperament to some degree, because, as you said, Leon, 7th in Ligue 1, which perhaps is a false position, but 7th nonetheless. They've lost 9 of 26 games in the French League this year. Scrape through against Juve. There was nothing to be overly fearful of. And yet you do feel that Pep is ascribing these Champions League knockout games with such a level of importance that he almost can't bring himself to believe that it's as simple as picking his usual best team and saying just go out and play, that he has to come up with something a little bit ingenious that nobody saw coming to ensure safe passage. And you think that is somebody losing their nerve almost, overthinking it, overanalyzing it. And Niall Quinn said it on the Virgin coverage. He fully suspects the players in that dressing room 2-3 days out from the game when Pep would have first introduced the game plan and started working on it. Players in that dressing room would have been looking at each other and looking at the two Silvas on the bench, at Foden, as you said, on the bench, Mahrez on the bench, looking at each other and saying, this is odd. Why are we doing this against Leon?
Yeah, and even Brian Kerr raised the issue as well. I was watching at the break, just after half time, he was saying, like, he's got 5 substitutions and the potential for another one if it goes to extra time. Why not make one now? When he waited another few minutes into the second half before Mahrez was introduced, and even then, and it wasn't a case that it was too little too late, but it was certainly a case that the substitution could have been made earlier. And for my liking, it probably would have been one of the Silvas or Phil Foden that came on and not Mahrez. But it's a strange one. Like, they have eyed this competition up from a long, long way out. And maybe this is something that in his own mind, Guardiola's been tinkering with since March. But it seems just really odd to place it in a Champions League quarter-final against... We're not saying it was an easy draw, but they couldn't have been handed, I guess, a better draw in the Champions League and a better passage towards the final than was laid out in front of them. Yeah. And he managed to make a hames of it.
PSG against Leipzig tomorrow, Lyon against Bayern Wednesday. I'm sure you're going to put on your hipster hat and try and tell me that's a good lineup, but that stinks. As a Champions League semi-final, that stinks. I want nothing to do with that.
I'm there for it. I'm absolutely there for it. Although, like, we all have our reservations about the RB Leipzig model and the Paris Saint-Germain model. I mean, big oil against big energy drink is hardly a match that you want to really get behind one way or the other. But I think the other semi-final is actually really interesting. I think as I mentioned on Friday night on Twitter, I mean, what we've seen here, I can't say I'm surprised that the country that managed to handle the pandemic best in Europe and has been back playing the longest has managed to perform the best during this Champions League resumption. And that was very much at evidence with Munich's performance the other night, and was with the way RB Leipzig didn't lose their heads at all after falling behind in their semi-final. So I think Germany's overall handling of the situation and the Bundesliga club's handling of the situation over the course of the last 3 months is actually bearing fruit here. And Hansi Flick's appointment looks all the more shrewd as each game passes as well.
Sure does. I had written off Thomas Muller. I thought it was over. That was, every German piece we've done.
Well, so Pep Guardiola.
3, 4, 5 years. It was like Muller is finished. It's gone. It's over. So he's back. Philippe Auclair will talk to us after 9 o'clock on the football show. Always a brilliant guest. Predominantly about PSG. We'll touch on Lyon as well, but predominantly PSG. It would seem that Neymar has really settled down off the field as much as on the field. So Philippe on the way after 9. And then Andy West from Spain, Ronan. I mean, it says something about the weekend that here we are well into the show and Barca losing 8-2 and replacing their manager is a mere afterthought by the Monday. Messi standing there looking around him, looking at the empire crumbling. And he says today, counter to a report, that he won't be going anywhere.
Yeah, you just wonder from his point of view, like, where would you even go at this point? And on the flip side, like, who would take that huge financial burden? Granted, he's the greatest player alive, but all that goes with it is a difficult one to square the books on, given the circumstances we're in at the moment. But I think the most sensible thing would be to try and keep him there at Barcelona and just try and hit the reset button a little bit. Since Pep Guardiola left, they haven't really. I know identity is probably an overplayed thing, and the Barcelona way is definitely can be a little bit tokenistic, but they need to go back to their roots a little bit. Like, that team there was no identifying factors about Barcelona's style of play at all from the performance they put in. Not least, like, you can say what you want about Guardiola's team and to what extent he deserves credit, but he had them pressing from the front. That was definitely noticeably absent against Bayern from the start, even when the game was still in the melting pot. So I don't know. Thomas Muller's an interesting one. Yogi Love told him he was done as well. So I think if the Euros had happened and then off the back of Thomas Muller doing this ahead of them, it would have been quite a surreal thing that he wouldn't have been playing. But he's now authored, obviously, two of the most humbling defeats ever in football, probably ever, definitely in the last 10 years. You were there, Joe, were you, for the 7-1? Yeah. And I don't know, when Robert Lewandowski missed, or Robert Lewandowski, as Thomas Muller has called him now, when he missed that chance, I think at 3-1, when he missed the chance, I was like, well, that's where this is going, because they got in so easily that I was like, this is, they're not just going to let their foot off the pedal here, because they beat Chelsea in the first leg of that tie and still went out and destroyed them in the second leg just for fun. So they were definitely not going to let Barcelona off the hook, and that was borne out as well.
Yeah. We'll talk to Andy West and see what the story is after about 9:30. Ronald Koeman obviously is now, it seems, manager. He's leaving his role as Netherlands coach. I saw Sid Lowe today pointing out that the 900 million that they have famously spent since 2015 has been spent on 29 different players, and Sid was saying you couldn't really make a case that any single one of them has been an out-and-out success, which is quite
Friday night.
When you think
Friday night there was 3 100 million Barcelona signings, all of them on the bench and one of them for the opposition. Like that tells you, like, and this summer alone, or this break alone, whatever it happens to be, they're selling Rakitic and bringing in Pjanic, so they're upping their age profile again in midfield. And it just, like, their transfer policy over the past 3-4 years maybe doesn't make a whole heap of sense.
I don't know what question they were asking themselves when they signed Pjanic. I don't know what question they're asking, but he is not the answer to their woes, because that man is not exactly Brian Robson stomping around the pitch. He likes a few touches and to observe what's in front of him. I think Barcelona needed a bit more than that, the way things are going.
Let's just slow everything down a bit more. That's what we need right now. But someone like Griezmann is a brilliant player. And that's maybe something to talk to Andy West about. There's just too many really good players who've gone there and haven't quite settled. And the suspicion definitely lingers that if you're not in Messi's club, or if you don't have what the kind of cool kids in the class there, consider Barca DNA in your play, you can be ostracised pretty quickly, and it can be the breaking of you.
On that, there was one of the most striking aspects for me on Friday night was that I think it was Gerard Piqué was straight out in the media afterwards, and I think he was the most vocal, saying that stuff needs to change at the club and there needs to be a radical overhaul and a radical change in the way things are thought around there. And there's no doubt that they do. Yeah. But Gerard Piqué has engineered himself into a position where he's able to come out with stuff like that, and it will go not unpunished, but it will go unchecked by his higher ups. And it's not something for a player to be saying that things need to change at the very, very higher level straight after a match, no matter how humiliating the result has been and no matter how experienced he's been there. That's not his place. And they've engineered themselves, him, Messi, Busquets, that range of players have engineered themselves. They've been there so long, they've won so much, that they can probably elbow around a little bit too heavy in around the dressing room.
It's definitely a powerful dressing room. Let's get into the newsround then. With thanks to Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. And you're starting with the rugby, Richie?
Yeah, Munster have returned to training ahead of Saturday's Pro 14 derby, with Leinster training at the province, as we know, was suspended at the end of last week after an academy player tested positive for COVID-19. Munster say that player is now asymptomatic and will continue to be monitored. The one senior player and 5 academy players who were close contacts and advised to self-isolate will continue to do so, although all 6 have produced negative results so far. So that's good news from Munster. Bad news from Leinster. Fergus McFadden unlikely to get the Leinster farewell that he'd wanted. The Ireland international has suffered a calf injury in training and he'll miss the next 6 weeks. McFadden's due to leave the province at the end of the season, but could have already played his final game. Should his recovery go to plan, all things going well, he could be fit for a potential Heineken Champions Cup semi-final, but it's unlikely that he would be risked. Leinster centre Conor O'Brien will miss the next few months after undergoing surgery on a long-term hamstring problem.
Keith Wood, Rory O'Connor on the way. So rugby is back in a big way. 4 straight weeks of Pro 14. There'll be these 2 rounds of Interpros, and then there'll be a semi-final and a final. There'll most likely be Irish involvement all the way, to be followed then the following week by Heineken Champions Cup quarter-final, Ulster and Leinster in action, and then semi-final the next week. So 6 straight weeks, very possibly for Leinster and possibly Ulster as well, certainly 5 weeks for them. So we'll talk to Rory and Keith after 8 o'clock. There is European football this evening, Rich.
Yeah, Sevilla await the winners of tonight's Europa League semi-final in Dusseldorf. Inter are looking to reach a first European final in a decade when they face the Ukrainians of Shakhtar Donetsk, and kickoff is at 8 o'clock. Here at home, the top 2 in the SSE Electricity First Division meet tonight, with leaders Cabinteely away to second place Longford Town. Third place Drogheda entertain Galway, while UCD take on Athlone Town.
Yeah, so Sevilla are through. I didn't even mention Manchester United. Lindelof, the real victim for me, Ronan, he had Bruno Fernandes getting in his face, blaming him for the mistake, and quite rightly, Lindelof, who had, he's at fault for his fair share and maybe could have done a bit better for this goal. But I mean, Wan-Bissaka is the man, and poor old Lindelof's taking it from Bruno. Turn around, Bruno.
Do you think? I was actually, you don't mind seeing that. I know it wasn't a calculated move on Bruno Fernandes' part. I think he was genuinely reacting in the moment, and optically, just watching it on television, it looked like, before he saw the deflection on the cross, that Lindelof had just, for some reason, left that part of the pitch unguarded. Wan-Bissaka, as you mentioned, had full view of it. So even if he saw Lindelof, even if he was thinking, why is Victor not picking up that player? He, having known that he wasn't, he should have been right in there to stop it. But Wan-Bissaka seemed to be a little bit off it last night. I don't know.
He peeled off Lindelof. I mean, Lindelof had kind of lost him. He was in between the two of them. So it's over to you, Wan-Bissaka. I would have thought straight away. But
the thing, I don't want to be too critical of Solskjaer not making substitutions, because you look at the bench and there's not much there. But I think Sevilla had made 4 subs before he made any. And it's not as if they have this ridiculous cast of characters on the bench either. Luke de Jong came on and scored the winning goal. Do you know what I mean? It's not. I'm sure there's a United players there who could have come on and affected the match. Yeah. And especially off the back of extra time against Copenhagen and the 370th day of their season. You can't expect these 11 lads to, having started the second half so well and were visibly drudging around the pitch there, that I think if you're going to pick any fault with Solskjaer, who has actually turned things around the last few months, I don't understand the substitutes thing.
Yeah, it's probably a fair point. You kind of suspect he was just hoping a chance would fall to Greenwood in particular, so you leave him on. And then Martial was still causing a degree of havoc. It didn't seem like Rashford was having a great night, so maybe he was a decent candidate to take off. But who are you bringing on? Mata, Mata with his walking stick up and down the left hand. You got Gallo, he's more central. Jesse Lingard, now is your time. I can sort of see how he thought, maybe I'll just stick rather than twist.
Even the likes of Fred, who actually, I think Fred was one of United's best players last night, but there's not much drop-off if you bring on Scott McTominay and ask him to stand on Ever Banega for 15 minutes and cut that thread out, or bring on Matic, who's actually been very good the last few months, or Brandon Williams, who again has been taking a lot of stick. I actually thought he played okay, but he was on a yellow card. And you can bring on Timothy Fosu-Mensah or bring on Dan James, who ultimately did come on.
Well, that's the problem with United. That's the problem with United generally, is that their team is very, very lopsided. Up front, they look brilliant. Mason Greenwood, Anthony Martial, Marcus Rashford, fantastic players. Bruno Fernandes is obviously added to that as well. There's a case to be made for Paul Pogba. But beyond that, everything is pretty average. And then you've got layers of average. And that's where United need to be looking at this summer, because adding a Jadon Sancho onto an already lopsided forward line doesn't necessarily look like the best of moves. Might be long term, but they do need to look elsewhere and need to look at adding quality in depth around the pitch, because they just don't have it at the minute.
I have breaking news which will shock you.
Yeah, see that there.
So Quique Setién has been sacked by Barcelona. The board of directors have agreed Quique Setién no longer the first team coach. This is the first decision within a wider restructuring of the first team, which will be agreed between the current technical secretary and the new coach, who will be announced in the coming days. That is the breaking news from Barcelona. Matthew McConnell on the Snooker Friday, one of the best days of snooker I've ever seen. Finally felt like snooker was one of the headline stories again.
McGill and Wilson was a hell of a match, by the way. That's going to get forgotten in all of this because Wilson was beaten so handsomely in the final. But that last frame between McGill and Wilson on Friday afternoon was just engrossing television, and it made me realise how much I'd missed watching that level of snooker. It was just safety after safety, error after error, and just brilliant viewing. It was an exercise in mental anguish for both players. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Unknown texture. Barca and City playing out from the back. It's a fraud system. And somebody else, Pep has spent nearly 800 million sterling at City, has not got past the quarterfinals since he left Barcelona. It is damning when you read it like that. Any other manager would be worried. He was hired to win the European Cup. Yeah, it's true. I mean, they have played such glorious football and won the Premier League in amazing fashion, but the European situation is not good. Richie, where we go next?
Yeah, we'll go to Barcelona. As we mentioned there, Ronald Koeman's been lined up to replace Quique Setien as the head coach of Barca. Setien sacked after Friday's 8-2 Champions League humiliation at the hands of Bayern Munich. He'd only been in the gig since January. Koeman, whose free kick won Barcelona their first European Cup in 1992, has a release clause with the Netherlands, allowing him to take the reins at the Camp Nou should they come calling. A 3-hour Barcelona board meeting took place this afternoon. Friday's defeat has sparked fresh talk that Lionel Messi could leave the club, and speaking on this morning's OTB AM, Graham Hunter could see the Argentine leaving, but only for the right project.
I think it's reasonable to say that if the right football project was presented to him, he would say, right now, in my opinion, I'll take that. But I still go back to you about how does he get out? I think that is egos come into this. You don't want to be branded as the president and let Messi go. If he goes in the summer free, then that's something that is of his own free will. And listen, off the record, don't tell the audience, please don't quote this back at me, never tell Xavi. But if Xavi's taking over next summer and he gets a clean slate rather than having to reorientate a 34-year-old Messi and a Busquets at 33, and Alba and Busquets, who both look athletically shot right now. In Alba's case, that might be addressable. In Busquets, it's not. They've got contracts until 2023 and 2024, respectively. That's another horrible imbalance. Fantastic footballers, but athletically not in the best of nick. Xavi's problems, if he is the coach coming in next summer, and right now, if you ask me for percentages, that's the percentage bet. Would he possibly prefer to go, I don't have Messi, I'm so upset about that, but I'm going to rebuild from scratch?
Very possibly would. I mean, massaging 34, 35, 36-year-old Messi out of the team and integrating him happily into the dressing room as a super sub of sorts, that's tricky territory. So it's going to be a very interesting couple of years at Barcelona because it's an inevitable massive shift. You lose the best player possibly of all time. You're kind of starting over. I mean, he's the fulcrum, he's the business plan, he's the model for the last couple of years. Inevitably, it's no one's fault. How can you not rely on Messi? So now trying to restructure with or without him, and if it's with him, it's with a much older, declined Messi. That's a tricky territory either way. Bring us some Ronnie, Richie.
Yeah, Ronnie O'Sullivan pulled level with Steve Davis and the great Ray Reardon on 6 World Snooker titles last night, completing an 18 frames to 8 victory over Karen Wilson at the Crucible. O'Sullivan was asked to reflect on moving to within one title of Stephen Hendry.
To me, it's just a tournament. It's a great sort of way of measuring yourself, I suppose. Surprised I'm standing here as a winner because there were times during the tournament I thought, how am I going to get this home, But I managed to do it, and I managed to find some form within every match which allowed me to get through. So, yeah, like I said, as long as I keep hitting solid shots and penetrating through the ball and allows me to play aggressive, then I've always got a sort of chance.
It was really interesting on how he lost his cue action during this tournament. I mean, there were times where, in golfing parlance, he didn't have a swing, and he managed to get it done. It does, Richie, at an interesting age for him, maybe give him an incentive. I always felt he was just going to walk away from the game overnight, that he'd lost interest. Like one of the issues against Selby in the semi-final, according to the pundits, was that could Ronnie concentrate for this long against somebody who will grind you down and drag the arse out of this whole thing and, be a war of attrition? Does Ronnie have the mental fortitude to go through that again, because he just finds it quite boring and difficult to stay concentrated? And he has this time. So that moves him to 6 alongside Ray Reardon and Steve Davis. He's 1 behind Hendry. It would seem, based on everything, that he could go again. You just think this could be the win that really gives him an incentive to go for 7 next year. And then you figure if he goes for 7 and 8's within touching distance, he hangs on for 8. So there's a real chance now we're looking at a 3 in a row here for O'Sullivan.
In terms of walking away from the game, I think that bridge has been crossed, and probably by a couple of years. Mentally, he's looked more together. There are quirks and there are eccentricities about O'Sullivan that we saw during the course of this World Championship that are never going to go away, and we're probably the better for them if we're all honest. Yeah. But I think from walking away from the game, I think that bridge is crossed. I think he's here to stay. It's just in terms of managing his calendar and keeping his head, as you said, the best he can. These environments of playing behind closed doors is not something that he's actually managed pretty well over the last while. He complained about different tournaments being played in different areas, and earlier on in the season, even when there were fans present, certain ones weren't to his liking. It's just a case of just keeping it together, and if he manages to do that, he's got another 3 or 4 world titles in him at least, I would say. But it is a case of playing in the head, and that's ultimately where Wilson lost over the weekend. Wilson, after his semi-final with Anthony McGill, was interviewed, and he was completely shot. Like, mentally, he didn't cope well with how it was won. He won on a fluke essentially, and then wrapped up the frame, and then was speaking to Colin Murray, I saw for Eurosport afterwards, was immediately talking about going for a couple of pints, and he had to be almost reminded that, mate, you have a final to play tomorrow. I don't think Wilson was ever winning with a chance of playing in O'Sullivan on form and beating him, but O'Sullivan can go and win another 3 or 4. As you say, it's just a matter of keeping his head between the dishes. Yeah, well, Beans, I mean, if the all-time record was 12 and it was, pretty much
I'd pack it up
ungettable,
tomorrow. I think he'd pack it up. So that's why I think this could be the incentive that focuses the mind for it. Gives it a good bash for a year or 2 or 3, and you'd almost back him to get it done. We're pretty much way out of time. Give me a last story or two.
Yeah, Shane Larry intending to play at next month's rearranged Dubai Duty Free Irish Open. The tournament moved to Galgorm Castle in Antrim and will begin on September 27th. Larry says his plan is to play the US Open at Winged Foot the week prior and then fly home. Players travelling to the UK from the US Open don't need to self-isolate. Yesterday's Wyndham Championship won by Jim Herman, the world number 318, pipping Billy Horschel by a single shot. And a fourth Limerick club has suspended activities due to COVID-19 fears. Capamore say they're awaiting the results of a suspected case within the club. Ahan have also suspended activity, although they too do not have a confirmed case. Clohan and St Patrick's both have players who have tested positive, although it's believed that neither transmission came via GEA activity.
Okay. Champions League is obviously back, and to celebrate, OTB's teamed up with Pepsi Max and Doritos to run a special remote roadshow. It's this Thursday with guests including Chris Sutton, Jason McAteer, Stilian Petrov, David Myler and the Celtic manager Neil Lennon as well. Tickets are free, but they're going fast. If you want to get them, go over to otbsports.com/events and get yours. Pepsi Max and Doritos, it's back. Get ready. And the Celtic theme being what it is, we've got a really nice prize for you if you're a big Celtic fan in particular. A private Zoom chat with the Celtic manager Neil Lennon before the roadshow. So you can ask him whatever you want, have a chat with him. Private Zoom chat with Neil Lennon before Thursday roadshow. To be with the chance of winning, just tell us. Tony Watts scored the winning goal in Celtic's win against Barcelona back in 2012. Who scored the opening goal that night? So your name and answer, 53106. Who scored the opening goal that night? And we'll pick a winner this evening. Richie, thank you.